Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Modcast here on the Orange Bloods Texas football channel. By the way, check us out over at orangebloods.com. And in the event that you're watching this and you've never been to the website, it's pretty cool. We got a brand new offer, by the way, that expires, I think, at the end of the week. You basically get the next year for $20. Check it out. I'm Geoff. That's Anwar, Alex, and Jason. We're going to be talking Texas football. The season's over. There's no games to preview. There's no Kansas State this week. There's just a lot of big picture conversations to be had about the state of the program and where it goes into the 2022 offseason and things that it needs to improve on. Do us a favor, like the video if you learn anything, or if we make you laugh, or just if you want to contribute to the party, that would be fantastic. Subscribe to the channel, click the bell to get notifications, and by all means, leave your comments in the comments section. Jason, I want to come to you first. It's been a weird week in that the weekend ends and the Longhorns get a win on Friday, right? So everybody's not in the terrible mood that comes with a loss for the first time in a couple of months. Even if it was just Kansas State, people were able to buy into the idea of the Roschon Johnson game and that, hey, let's just suck on some positivity for a little bit and enjoy the taste. And then over the weekend, Lincoln Riley goes to USC, and Oklahoma is then and even now in a bit of a free fall until they have their new coach. They lose five-star running back Raleek Brown last night. We're recording this on Thursday morning. So Wednesday, they lose the number one commitment in their class after having already lost a bunch of other commitments. So there was this positivity, Jason, in the air. But it feels like over the course of the last 4 days, the feel good of, I think Texas fans enjoyed the hell out of Sunday and Monday. I really do. I think it was the best they felt in months. And yet, as the week has gone on, I've been getting PMs, and I've noticed that the attitude on our Orange Bloods message board in general has kind of, the high of the good time is gone. So I'm coming to you first. Give me something positive. Let's just start with the single most positive piece of recruiting news or angle that you can give on a Thursday morning, 13 days from National Signing Day.
Yeah, before I get to the positive, it is funny that the trajectory was, everybody's so excited with the Lincoln Riley news, and here we are Thursday morning, and I just posted the recruiting board, and people are like, no, I don't want to look at it because it's bad news. And I was texting with our Oklahoma State publisher, Jeff Johnson, last night and telling him, hey, I talked to running back that's committed to Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon, that Texas offered, and Ollie tells me he's going to stick to Oklahoma State. And Jeff asked me, he said, hey, is your message board enjoying what's going on in Norman as much as mine is? And I was like, well, they were, but now everybody's back in the gutter. I said, Oklahoma State's playing for a Big 12 championship this weekend. So
I'd say that board's a little happier than ours.
Yeah, they're in a better mood. And he goes, yeah, that's true. So a good piece of news, Ketch, is that this Texas staff is out on the road. They're doing, I wouldn't say evaluations, but they're trying to just kind of strengthen some of those relationships. I think those in-home visits are going well. I still think Texas is in striking distance with some of these top offensive linemen. Are they going to be able to get over the hump with those guys? Remains to be seen, but I think there's a good chance Texas gets a couple of those guys. And you're talking about Oklahoma, Kobe McKenzie is a linebacker, Rivals 250 guy that was committed to Oklahoma. He decommitted the day, I think it was the day of the Lincoln Riley announcement. Texas comes in, talks to him, ends up offering him, I think it was Tuesday, I believe it was. And I think there's a really strong chance Kobe McKenzie ends up being a part of this Texas class, maybe sooner than later. And he's a really good player, and he fits a position of need. Texas needs help at the linebacker position. So if he winds up committing to Texas, and my money's on Texas, I know you've got your future cast on Texas. You put it in before Texas even offered him. So good foresight on your part. But yeah, I think there's some good news coming potentially down the road. Maybe, like I said, maybe in the very near future in the way of a commitment from Kobe McKenzie.
Jason, the funny thing about McKenzie is I was not aware that Texas had not officially offered that.
Hey, don't admit that, dude. You look like you knew. Like
no, I think that's an indictment on the staff a little bit.
Well, a little bit.
I know that kid committed to Oklahoma super early, but that's a kid you offer no matter
Just
what.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, if you ever have any second guesses or anything like that, like knock on our door. That was one of those. We had heard that they had already started talking, and the idea that Texas hadn't offered literally never crossed my mind. And then when they offered the next day, it really was like, what do you mean you offered him today? That part of the process hadn't been completed until now. Strange recruitment in that the Longhorns seem to be seizing the opportunity. Anwar, I'll come to you. As you watch this from afar, Jason's job covering recruiting, your job observe recruiting from a slight distance. What have you seen? What are your observations for where we are going into the offseason?
Well, it's interesting because from a recruiting perspective, I think, most people were optimistic that this would be like a top 5 class. And it seemed to be that way for a little bit of time. I think, what is it now, at 7, if I'm correct, and 7 in holding, and we'll see what that looks
7
like.
7 and dropping, Anwar, is what I would classify it as, if we're being honest about it. But yeah.
Okay, so 7 and dropping at this point, and I'm assuming from the metric standpoint that number will drop a little bit more as more commits start coming in from other schools. Is that probably safe to say? So,
yeah, I mean, it depends on who Texas closes with. I mean, I can't, if they get a couple of these linemen that I mentioned, then they'll climb back up. So.
Yeah. So, the borderline top 10 at this point, maybe a little bit outside of it. And so, seeing how if they can close strong, it will be kind of the thing that I just want to monitor, going forward. I think for me, and we'll get into sports, but I'll get into it specific now. The thing that still is kind of glaring to me is only one receiver commit. And I know that they've had, a lot of receivers on this roster, but when you start getting past the, Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington and Troy O'Meary, well, Jordan and Troy have been fighting injuries over the past couple of years. Xavier's kind of been the guy that carried the bulk, and you figure might need a couple of other, guys, some, a couple of other quick go-to studs. And so just kind of where this is from a receiving standpoint, Alex will harp in on a little bit more on the offensive line, and they've got 3 committed, if I'm correct, and still 2 committed. 2. So they got 3 more to go before Alex calls them out.
Minimum, to hit the minimum.
Yeah. So, I just want to see what they do over the next few weeks as far as like closing strong. We'll get into the transfer market at some point, but just want to see what they do with, what is it now? Like 14 days left before signing day.
And Anwar, they've got 1 receiver commitment, and they've had 3 committed in this cycle. 2, Evan Stewart, don't forget, was a one-time Texas commitment. Of course, committed to A&M this week, 5-star player. Armani Winfield was committed to Texas for a long time. Decommits. Was that Thanksgiving Day? It's all running together.
I think wasn't it during the game?
Oh, yeah, you're right, Alex. That was in the second half during the game. He decommitted. I'm thinking of Jamarian Miller decommitted on Thanksgiving Day. So Anwar, they've had 3 committed, 3 really good ones, and now they're down to 1. And a couple of the other guys they've offered. I mean, we talked to Matthew Golden last night, and he was like, you know what? No thanks. I think I'm going to stick with either TCU or Baylor. So I put the recruiting board. I mentioned it earlier. I just posted it before we started recording, and I put some quick hitter notes. And for those watching, I will go through every position in the war room tonight. So check that out if you're not a subscriber. Shameless plug, like Ketch said, we got a great special going on. Sign up today to read it. We'll go player by player, but it's a complete failure. The wide receiver recruiting is a complete failure. It was last year. Xavier Worthy kind of saved their bacon by wanting to opt out of his Michigan letter of intent, and that was all Steve Sarkisian. He had a previous relationship with him at Alabama, of course, but think about if Xavier Worthy if that very unique situation hadn't unfolded the way it did and kind of fallen into Texas's lap, if we're being completely honest. I mean, wide receiver recruiting is as bad as offensive line recruiting was under Herb Hand and We know Herb Hand took a well-deserved beating for his offensive line recruiting efforts. Wide receiver has been every bit as bad. And you'd think Andre Coleman, the wide receiver coach, he's got an ace up his sleeve, man. Hey, you get to play under Steve Sarkisian's offense. Look what Xavier Worthy's done. Look at Sark's track record of developing receivers.
We'll play you early, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, he should be shooting from the layup line with these guys. And they've got one committed, and they only took 2 last year. I'm not counting Xavier Worthy last year. They took 2 last year that weren't necessarily high-profile guys. So they've got to get that stuff figured out at wide receiver recruiting. And then, of course, offensive line recruiting, which I'm assuming is probably, like you said, where Alex will go next. Sorry to jump in and cut everybody off. We need some positivity, but Alex, maybe you can find some positivity somewhere, man.
Don't ask him about the offensive line. Alex, I do want to come to you, and Anwar, you and Jason both hit on, I think, the direction of where we're going to go in a second, right? Like after we hear from Alex, I think there's a recruiting conversation and momentum conversation that we can dig deeper into. And it really dovetails into the portal and the coaches making these decisions of, do I go into the portal for a player, or do I go at this point for wide receiver? When they offer Savion Red, he was either the 10th or 11th receiver from the state of Texas this year that the Longhorns have offered. So it's like, well, how deep do you go with offers at that position in state before you eventually decide maybe we should try a different approach? Alex, before we do that, though, I'm curious. You finished. It was a real labor of love. I don't even know if love is the right word to describe.
Not this year.
Not this year. Grading the final game film and putting the ribbons and bows on a year's worth of evaluations. When you did that, having counted the snap reps of every player on the roster, up and down, I mean, in your mind, and it may just be an obvious answer, but I still want to put the ball on a tee for you anyway. The areas for you as you finish grading this team and knowing the seniors that are gone and the makeup of the roster as it stands with what's coming back and what happened on the field this year, the urgent areas for you in terms of this team needs immediate help through hook or crook at what positions? Offensive line's obvious, but how would you rank them? What immediately pops into your mind?
Okay, well, first thing, can I just touch quickly on 2 things you guys said that I wanted to respond to, but didn't want to interrupt?
Yeah.
The first would be, man, Andre Coleman is still living off this Tyler Lockett, Byron Pringle stuff from K-State. I don't know, like, what is he recruiting on? Like, it's like, you guys are right, man. That's pretty. I hadn't really thought about how that's been pretty bad. You know, that's been some thin wide receiver recruiting for sure. Secondly, boy, how good is that sale that we have right now? I've never seen a sale where you can get Orange Bloods for $20 for a whole year.
And 21 cents.
2021 for the year. 2021. But still, $20 for the whole year.
And it's not like they're offering it, Alex, in like June. I mean, now's the perfect time because it carries you through all of recruiting, all of next football season, most of recruiting next year. I mean, it's good deal.
The whole season. I mean, it really is probably the best deal in the 20 years that we've been with Rivals. In the past, it's always been the gear, right? Spend the full amount, but get like $100 in gear, but you still have to spend the full amount for an annual. $20.21. I almost am like
$1.50 a month. I mean,
it's almost like how are we going to make cash off these?
Yeah,
off these new
come on, Rivals. I still got to pay bills.
Yeah. But anyway, go give that a look. It's right on the front banner over at Orange Bloods. You can find all the content from all of us. This is gonna be a big and I'm just like, I'm glued to the boards reading what Jason's writing about recruiting and everything, because of course, like, yeah, man, I'm worried about the offensive line, but as far as what Ketch said, of course, the offensive line is something that needs immediate improvement. The pad level and the strength, the functional strength along the defensive line needs improvement. I'm not sure that that's an exact order, though. I think that the second thing behind offensive line is just finding an organic pass rush, just getting a rush off the edge that doesn't need to be manufactured, getting a rush off the edge that's like where you got a dude or you got a couple of dudes, you just got a system, you got some games and some stunts that you can use that can get a little bit of just a little bit more organic, consistent pressure where you don't got to bring so many guys. And then probably the defensive line stuff after that. Look, I mean, Texas has a little bit of a safety issue too right now, if you think about it. I mean, I like what I've seen out of JD Coffey this year. Maybe he can step into one of those safety spots. Jaron Thompson wasn't particularly good this year. The tackling from him really needs to improve. Maybe he moves into one of the nickel kind of spots with Anthony Cook moving on. The linebackers at the second level, and this could be mitigated to some degree because Jalen Ford seems like he's stepping up, but the linebackers need to be better at the second level with their ability to get off of blocks when they're moving laterally. That was an issue that we've talked about that cropped up again and again and again on these back-breaking runs versus 3 different teams this year, where there were big runs that literally won games for teams in the fourth quarter. That was because of inside linebackers not being able to get off blocks at the second level while moving laterally. And then, I just think overall quarterback play. I mean, that's just let's get back to the start and probably bury the lead. Texas needs good, consistent quarterback play. It got some good quarterback play from Casey Thompson this year, but it needs to be consistent quarterback play from the most important position on the roster.
Hey, let me jump in before we transition, Ketch. You want some good news, right? That's what you asked for?
Yes.
Steve Sarkisian, per my man Sam Spiegelman, right now is visiting with Arch Manning. So there you go. Can we turn this into the Arch Manning podcast or Modcast?
I almost feel guilty though. I almost feel guilty even saying Arch Manning's name right now. If they pull Arch Manning, it really would be an indicator of just, I keep waiting for this staff to be like, see, this is how good we are. This is what we can do. And it really hasn't happened quite yet in recruiting this year. Arch Manning would absolutely do that. Jason, quite frankly, that's a great point. I want to go to the recruiting thing because I feel like there's an elephant in the room that this is where this would be earmuffs, kids. If you're watching this video, I'm going to curse, but what I'm about to say is not very uplifting. But I feel like it needs to be said.
And we might curse too. So
yeah, it may cause everybody to curse as a byproduct. This Texas staff, because I'm watching the way they're handling the portal, and I'm convinced that they haven't started offering kids out of the portal yet at need positions because they don't want to screw up. They don't want to offer this kid at Florida International, who's an offensive lineman that basically everybody in the country is offering. He was an all-conference left tackle. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. I mean, he's a good player. 6'6", like 320. Like he fits everything that Texas would like. But I feel like they don't want to do anything to shake up what they think they may have cooking with all of the offensive linemen that they're recruiting because they're really selling immediate playing time. And the last thing you want to do is undermine that by offering some kid who's in the portal at potentially the position that one of these guys would play at. So I feel like the coaching staff is really optimistic and positive about how they're going to finish. That come signing day, you just watch, they're going to do the damn thing. And yet I cannot shake the fact that in the summertime, the best recruits in this state had a very hard time saying yes to Texas. And the thought going into the season was they wanted to watch and see what Texas did. And then, God, if Texas could make a convincing case, it could be game on. However, that's not what happened. Texas went 5-7. And I feel like we all knew the stakes of the season going into it. That goes with Arch Manning as well. At one point, we were having conversations about what this team's record needed to be to pull that guy. 5-7 was never discussed. I'm a little concerned about Texas falling really flat on its face in recruiting with the truly big dogs. It might not happen because they could very well get Devin Campbell and close with a really good offensive line. I mean, they can, and it doesn't feel like an impossibility, but the tea leaves over the course of the last 6 months, and even last night when you've got kids committed to Oklahoma State or choosing between TCU and Baylor, if Texas can't get a Matthew Golden to say, oh man, Steve Sarkisian wants to recruit me.
Yeah, can't even get him to visit.
Yeah. If you can't get that guy to even come visit, are they going to be able to get these guys to actually say, I do at the altar? And if they don't, here, earmuffs, kids, what the fuck then?
Yeah, and to be clear on Golden, he did take an unofficial visit for the Kansas State game, but Texas wanted to get him for an official, and he has declined. It's interesting, Catch, and I don't know what they do, what the F they, and I don't know. The answer is I don't know. But, back in the summer, it was, hey, watch what we got cooking in the fall. Everybody's going to want to jump on board, right? Now that message has turned to, oh, we don't have our guys. We need you to come in and be one of our guys. And hey, you can compete early. The sales pitch has totally flipped. That's not a good thing. That's just not a good thing. I mean, it's a little bit of spin. I mean, it's good salesmanship. You sell what your strength, is, and the strength right now is early playing time. And your concern is absolutely legitimate. And I think you're spot on when we're talking about portal stuff, especially with offensive line. It makes sense. I mean, they're not going to, if they go out and offer a bunch of offensive linemen in the portal, you're offering those guys not to come in and sit for a couple of years. You're saying, hey, dude, we want you to come in and be a starter right away. Well, that's exactly what they're selling Kelvin Banks and Cam Dewberry and, everybody else on, DJ Campbell. So Malik Agbo, so going on Nato Umeozulu. So you can go down the list.
Say that again.
Nato Umeozulu. How about that? It just rolls.
That's
if
fantastic.
If you say it enough, it does literally just kind of roll off the tongue. And truth be told, I'm probably butchering it, but that's how I've said it for 6 months. And the first time I ever talked to him, I called him Neto, and he did not like that. It's Neto. He made it clear it's NATO. So, but I think it's kind of smart to not offer those guys until, like Anwar said, we're less than 2 weeks from the early signing period. You know what? Most of those guys in the transfer portal aren't going to decide then. Probably if, Texas may want to wait, see if a guy wants to visit, and then you offer him. You tell the guy, hey, come visit, you'll get your offer. That's what Texas has done in the past. So there's probably different strategies as to why they're not being aggressive in terms of offering guys in the portal. They do make sense. But I think you're right in being concerned. If you're a Texas fan, this staff has been overconfident with guys previously. A lot of guys. I can go down the list. I mean, offensive line, defensive back. They've been overconfident. I've talked to sources who've thought, hey, we're going to get this guy. We're going to get this guy. And then he winds up committing elsewhere a week later. So, I think Texas is in striking distance on a lot of those offensive linemen I just mentioned. But am I sitting here predicting that Texas is going to get 3 of those guys, even 2 of them? Probably not. I mean, maybe 2. It's a little bit of Russian roulette they're playing. On one hand, you're not going after these portal guys right now, which is going to set you behind other schools that are, because you think you're going to be successful with these high school guys. Well, you've swung and missed on a lot of those high school guys before that you thought you were going to get. So I understand this strategy. I understand why they're doing what they're doing, but it's high risk, high reward. And, we'll know shortly in the next 2 weeks at the latest, probably even before that on a couple of these guys, but we'll know in 2 weeks whether or not that strategy is going to pay off for them.
Hey, Jason, can I just ask you 2 quick questions? I don't mean to hop in and do Catch's job, but there are 2 things. One, what day again is the first national signing day? What day is
it's the 15th, so it's 2 weeks from this Wednesday it just passed, and it goes Wednesday through Friday, Alex, and then it shuts down, and there's another one in February, of course.
Okay, and then as far as you said, you think that there could be chances of maybe getting up to 2 of those guys. So when you say those guys, do you just mean 2 of the super big guys like the Devon Campbell, Kelvin Banks?
Yeah, I'm basically the guys that are
Or do you
still,
include like NATO and
yeah, I'm including
Agbo?
NATO, Agbo certainly. And in fact, I'd put Agbo probably behind DJ Campbell as maybe if I'm ranking them in likelihood of winding up.
I was going to ask you to do that, Jason. Do that right
Yeah.
now, real quick
Okay.
off the top of your head.
I'm looking at my recruiting board. Well, and I've got them ranked there. People can see it there. But I'd go DJ Campbell 1. I still think Texas is the favorite there, especially with Lincoln Riley going to USC. That pretty much takes Oklahoma out of the mix. You got to be a little bit leery of USC, though. That was a school he really liked. He's visited there twice. He's taken an official visit to USC. He's taken an unofficial visit for his birthday. He and his family went out there. I think it was back in September. He can take a second official visit there. That's the new rule if there's a coaching change. So don't be shocked if DJ Campbell, Devon Campbell, takes a visit to USC. Still, I've got Texas as the leader there. After that, I'd probably go. I got Malik Agbo. I think I've got Texas at 50-50 there, man. Oklahoma was a major threat that people weren't talking about for Malik Agbo, the offensive lineman out of the Seattle, Washington area. They're no longer in the picture, I don't think. I think it's probably going to be Texas and Auburn. I talked to Texas recruits. They feel really good. If you got to read the tea leaves here on some of these guys, right? Well, Malik Agbo has joined some of these Instagram live sessions with some of these Texas commits this week. It's a small sign, but hey, it's a
He's been talking with Bijan Robinson on Instagram
Absolutely.
Live.
Yep. So I've got Malik Agbo second. I've got NATO Umeozulu third. I've got him at 45%. He's a little bit like DJ Campbell in that USC was a player for him before the coaching shakeup. Now, will they be a player again? Remains to be seen. And NATO's really tough to figure out, but he's been to Austin. He liked his official visit. Obviously, it's close to home. He's from Allen, Texas. So I've got him slightly less than 50% chance. Then I go to Cam Dewberry, who I have chances raising for Texas because Oklahoma's no longer in the picture. I still think Cam Dewberry winds up at A&M. And then after Cam, I've got it would be Ernest Green out of California would be my last one. I just don't think Texas has enough gas in the tank to beat out Georgia or Ohio State for Ernest Green. So
what about Kelvin Banks? Is he on that list?
I don't have Banks on my, I'm glad you asked, Alex. I don't have him on my board because he's committed to Oregon. I would probably put Banks right at that kind of Cam Dewberry 40%. He's committed to Oregon, but I'm telling you, man, I think Texas's chances with Kelvin Banks are higher than probably the average fan believes. The closer we get to signing day, maybe he wants to stay closer to home. He did visit Texas. I guess it was for the Kansas game. They didn't do themselves any favors there. But if you talk to people that spent time with him that weekend and sources at Texas, they think they've got a really good chance to flip that commitment. And while we're talking about him, we can talk about Cam Williams too, the other offensive lineman from Duncanville committed to Oregon. I'd probably put him a notch below Kelvin Banks. Man, that's how many guys? 8 guys. I'm kind of scattering all around in my rankings, but that's kind of the just kind of nutshell version of where I think Texas stands with all of them.
So Jason,
that's a big group of awesome. It's a big group of awesome players, man. Like you said,
it is, and if you can get 2 of them, man, you
Yeah.
do backflips. If you're Kyle Flood, if you can get 2, and then anything above that is icing on the cake. Yeah.
It's funny that you said that, Jason. So my question for you is, if I set the number, it feels like the first 3 that you mentioned are the 3 that they really have the best chance with. Everybody else they have chances with, but it's hard to think.
I would throw Kelvin Banks into that group too, though. I think
But A&M circling with Banks as well, and they're just as much of a factor potentially as Texas if there's a flip in play.
Yeah, that's true.
But
I do think the early playing time selling point has resonated with Kelvin Banks quite a bit.
If I set the over and under at 1.5 for Texas with all those guys, you going over or under? You don't have to tell me the ones they're getting.
Yeah, no, I will. I'm going over just because I think they're going to get DJ Campbell still, although Devon Campbell, these kids are so hard to read. They get harder and harder to read every year. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and older, but if he wound up committing to Alabama, would it shock me? No, but I do think Texas is going to get Devon Campbell. Malik Agbo, listen, Malik wants to be in media. He wants to be on camera someday. Malik, if you talk to Malik Agbo, any one of us 4, you're going to come away thinking, oh, I love that guy. And like, I feel like I'm his best friend. Right. So Malik tells everybody what they want to hear and everybody believes it. Okay. So it's hard to read him because he's pretty good at what he does. But I really do think I'm putting Texas as probably at worst dead even, maybe the slight favorite. So the short answer to the question, if you're going over 1.5, very tentatively, I'm taking the over.
Isn't it weird that our most optimism is with the offensive line recruiting? I think that if we start talking about other positions, what's the next position where you think they're really going to find an impact player? Because I tend to agree with you. I'm kind of in lockstep with you about where they stand with those guys. I'm in zero disagreement. It's when we drift away from the offensive line that I'm not quite sure. I don't know what to think, quite frankly. I mean, Kobe McKenzie is actually a really good commitment. But beyond that, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, wide receiver looks like it's going to be a struggle. Defensive back, they've got some irons in the fire there, but I don't know who I would say right now is going to jump on board. I don't think Texas is going to land Denver Harris the way things are trending. I mean, are they going to be able to find a second running back?
Well, Jason, if they can sell playing time at offensive line, are you telling me that they can't sell playing time at corner right now? I mean,
they could.
Sean Jameson's gone. Josh Thompson's gone. Terry, I mean, it's like the best corner you have coming back is very, very clearly Jahdae Barron. That's, to me, that seems like
they can sell it, but not everybody's going to buy it. And I think going 5 and 7 hurt with some guys more than it did others. And I think Denver Harris is one of those guys that really hurt their chances with more so than maybe some of these offensive linemen.
Anwar, Penny, for your thoughts. You've now heard the high school football recruiting dissertation going into signing day. I'm just curious. You've absorbed all of that.
I'll believe nothing until I see it. I'll believe nothing.
Anwar's look said it all. Anwar's look said it all when you asked.
I believe it was.
Anwar's only smart one in this group. Yeah,
it was great. Like, I love the rundown. It was really informative. Jason, you do hard work. I respect everything that you do. I believe none of what you say.
You're just full of shit. Yeah.
Well, Anwar, I asked the question because the general conversation is like positivity, negativity. The biggest need area for Texas in this recruiting class is offensive line. Like, we've talked about it. We're 13 days away from them potentially. I mean, there's a world where they could get 3 of those guys. And now you're talking about, combined with the commitments they have, one of the best offensive line classes, I'm guessing, in the country. And then it would turn into development, and those guys can't just show up and, magically be great players more times than not. Are you buying it though? Like, from a momentum standpoint, are you buying that they get 2 or 3 of those guys based on, can you believe that would happen? I guess
I'm not buying it, not at this moment. But to be fair, Jason has boots on the ground, so I will defer to him in there. But this is a look, if they're able to pull it off, props to them. Like, props to Kyle Flood, the staff. I mean, none of there's no judgment on Kyle Flood. We know what he inherited, from an offensive line group, and we know how hard he's working to try to improve that. So, it's an uphill battle though when you're coming off a 5 and 7 season. Like, it's a hard sell. Like, it's because you're selling playing time while everybody else is selling playing time, and then what they're selling is playing time plus a chance to compete for, conference titles, national titles. Like, they're selling that, NFL, like all those type of things. And, you can sell a couple of things, but you can't sell all that. And so then it becomes a part of, like, what is a kid, what did they believe in? And look, if the Sarkisian and Flood and all this, if they can get them to buy into the dream and buy into the vision of this is what this program will be, hey, like I said, more power to them. But, we go back to, and we've said this before, when we start talking about the age of these players and how old they were when Vince Young scored that touchdown in versus USC. And now we've been saying it for years, but now we start talking about.
They were literally still in diapers, Anwar.
Yes.
Literally.
Yeah, we're talking about, so how many years ago versus how old they are now?
Yeah, they're 17 years old. It's 18. It's
There were
been
two.
16. Yeah, exactly. One or two. Yes.
So Texas can bring VY out for all these events, and they're like, "Who are you again?" Like, "Oh, it's okay. That's cool." I mean, and I'm sure I'm joking. Like, obviously they know Sean is, but the point is, it's recruiting against a lot, and they're recruiting against an immediate past, which is this season, the last few seasons. 2 losses to Kansas within the last 7 years. I mean, there's a lot of things that this group of players are growing up on. So that's why I say, hey, look, if they can pull it off, props to them. But I just need to see it, to be honest with you.
We've reached the point where Sam Ehlinger probably has more juice with high school kids than Vince would. I mean, they've grown up last few years.
I mean, I've wondered because we heard all this talk about how, especially when Bijan was going bananas to start this year with the number 5 and how he wore it because of Reggie Bush and stuff. I was thinking to myself, how does Bijan know Reggie Bush? I think maybe they watched some YouTube highlights of some of these guys.
I still hear Vince's name come up when I talk to, not a ton, but when I talk to recruits, it's BY still comes up. So
yeah.
I
was joking.
He's arguably the greatest college football player I've ever seen with my own eyes. But I mean, I wonder if Emmitt Smith walked, you know what I mean? You can tell guys that's a Hall of Fame football player, but there gets to be a point where you're just a guy that I watch those reaction videos when people watch Larry Bird and Michael Jordan. And I'm like, how have you never seen a video of Michael Jordan? Like, it's a little bit.
Our kids have never. My kid, you and I have kids around the same age. They've never seen Jordan play live. They know. I mean, they know he played basketball. They know the clothing brand, but my kid can tell you more about all the modern day guys, and that's what resonates with him.
My kids just think he makes shoes.
But they think Luca, Baby Bird. They don't even know what we're referring to. They just like Baby Bird, Luca. It's amazing.